Hello, our friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family.
Hello and welcome back.
Well, guys, we're going to start off taking a look at silver. As we see here, the U.S. Mint delays silver shipments due to global silver shortage. It's funny in this world, it feels like there's a shortage of almost everything that's actually tangible that you could touch and feel. Having, lived in a 100 square foot camper for a long period of time now, and needing to rely on something as simple and in days gone by taken for granted as quarters, for instance, quarters to go and actually, do laundry. It could be an adventure to go in to try to find quarters.
It can be. I went to a casino and they're like, we don't do that here. And then I went to a truck stop and they're like, no, we're sorry. There's this shortage going on and we just don't give out quarters. So.
And we went finally to Walmart and we had to wait like a half hour for the lady to come back with a tiny little Tupperware handful of quarters. Well, this is all I could find. It's like, well, okay, it's time for everybody to, switch everything over from being coin operated. It's what are you going to do when things are coin operated? Then you need coins, and there are no coins.
Right.
Well, the powers that be, they're going to have a solution for it. They have a solution for everything all planned out. But of course, there has to be a certain misery index. And you have to get to a certain level on the misery index before they'll roll it out.
I think we're becoming comedians going through this thing that we're going through because life can really throw you some curveballs. I guess you got to laugh at it, make it fun,
Yeah, most definitely. And, I think back for me, I've been on an adventure for 15 years now about as I've worked my way out of the system as much as I can. But believe me, it's not easy getting out of the system. But some can do it. As we were talking to a family member that's up in northern Arkansas, right on the Missouri border, close to Branson, and he grinds his own wheat.
Mm-hmm.
He does everything. He doesn't really buy anything from anybody.
That was
so
impressive.
To speak. That is impressive, because how many of us can actually do that? Can actually not rely on society for pretty much anything at this time.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's some Amish out there that are doing it in our Western civilization. I know there's tribes still in the Amazon that do it.
Yeah, but they haven't been exposed to our conveniences. So that's our problem. We were all kind of exposed to all these nice conveniences, and it's really hard once you're interwoven into that type of life. It's very difficult to get out.
And as we've talked about, gold and silver, I don't have a problem with people talking about gold and silver as investments because they do have intrinsic uses. Most definitely. Gold we've talked about, maybe it's the key to longevity and also increased levels of neuron connectivity, have usefulness in so many ways. Silver, very antiviral, antibacterial. And as we've, said, we've used that before where we don't use anything that is out there, that might cure acne, but give you the big C or something else. We don't go down that route. That's just our choice. But here you see interest in silver is soaring, both for industrial use and financial investment, echoing 2013's crisis. As a recent report from the Silver Institute, silver demand for printed and flexible electronics is forecast to increase 54% over the next 10 years. Demand for silver in this rapidly developing sector is forecast to come in at 48 million ounces this year. By 2030, the demand is expected to surge to 615 million ounces. And again, people that do invest in silver and gold are generally encouraged to actually have tangible assets. Because again, paper is paper. Mm-hmm. It's just basically like an IOU, so to speak. So we have seen a big uptick in the sun. Long duration C9.4 solar flare erupts from AR 2824, generating fast CME and S1. Minor solar radiation storm. So This is something that we got from the guides, that it's going to keep upticking, and especially this time period between the eclipses.
Absolutely. And they did tell us this just a little while ago, that things, if you're a star seed and you're sensitive, brace yourself. Things might get a little more difficult, and I'm not trying to pre-expose anything to anyone, but honestly, everyone that we talk to with all of our clients, they've been thrown some pretty difficult issues as well. So, but it's because our abilities are getting stronger. We're becoming more sensitive. We're going to have to adjust.
Yeah, and we're starting on this with this video talking about this type of subject, and then we're going to finish with some stuff that's connected. The changes, they're well underway, and I think the one thing that we hear from everybody is roller coaster, wild swings. Feeling like your feet maybe in the muck and the mire of the 3D world, but at times your head is up there in 5D, and we're getting a glimpse of both right now. As you see here from Space Weather, S1's minor solar radiation storm impacts. So minor impacts on HF radio in the polar regions, but they say none as far as impacts on biological life, but everything is interconnected. Now, it might be none from the modern scientific way of looking at things, but everything is affected by everything else. And by the way, there's quite a swarm going on over at Tahoe. Another worrying earthquake swarm hits Lake Tahoe. Scientists concerned about the potential for a tsunami. Yeah, tsunami on the lake. That could be, and that got me thinking about, paddling out there in, say, a kayak or a canoe, and all of a sudden you have a big one, and the next thing you know, you don't expect it, and whoa, where'd that wave come from? So the biggest quake was at 4.2, but when you look at this, they're all centered right under the lake. I was looking at this today, dead center. It feels like there is definitely an uptick in the actual true Earth changes right now, as Mother Nature is starting to do her thing more and more. And again, if we act as a virus, because we are like in her body, on her surface right now, and the system is not friendly to the planet, well, then the white blood cells will go ahead and react, if we're just using it as that type of analogy. So we see the strongest one struck near the north end of the lake at Dollar Point, California, around 8:30 a.m. No immediate reports of damage. But, obviously this is a busy time of year. Memorial Day weekend, guys. Sassy's speaking up there. She's concerned. Memorial Day weekend, everybody's going to be out and about enjoying themselves and taking in the weather. Oh, by the way, I was looking at some temps that were really abnormal for the Northeast. Northeast is going to be 15 to 30 degrees below typical, and a lot of rain. So for all our family members up in the New England area, New York and such, even over into Pennsylvania, it's going to be kind of damp and chilly.
Yeah, brr, that sucks, you guys. I'm sorry.
No, it's chilly today here. Relatively, we're going to be about 80. But it was brisk this morning, which is kind of surprising because, again, usually it's very hot, very humid when you get into this time period, and just kind of stays that way for, 5-6 months, in the South. But everything is changing. Everything is shifting as we see monthly low temperature records fall in Vanuatu as late season snow and unprecedented cold sweep Toronto, Canada. Yeah, the crazy CCTs. That's a good one, right? CCT? Crazy conspiracy theorists are being proved right again. I was thinking about that. And let me just throw that out there, guys. I thought that was a great topic for a video. Maybe to go up on Evolutionary. Can we name any that have been proven false, period?
I don't think we can. I honestly don't think we can. If you guys have any ideas of any that have been proven false, let us know. So there can be at least one for their side.
Yeah, I'm thinking things like, the phones can damage your brain. Well, remember you were don't worry. And then all the studies come out later on, can cause the big C. You don't want to necessarily hold it straight up to your head. I mean, as soon as these smartphones came out and I was just even keeping it by my head for a little while, I was getting massive headaches that were lasting all day. So a lot of people could sense things, and more people are going to be sensing things as these changes come. And we sense a lot of BS going on in this world.
Yes, we
I
do.
mean, in reality, it's to the point where, as it says here, this statement here is so true. The world is corrupt. But, and while most people are all too happy to agree with this statement, not enough people are calling it for what it is. As we watched a video that was, I think it was on Breitbart, but it was everywhere. And it was showing the being with those coal black eyes that used to be blue. That really, I thought I was watching a video of Count Dracula. I thought, here we are, we're watching a vampire movie as we see JB, making a statement and then starting to go off on a diatribe that would make your stomach turn, if you guys know what I'm talking about there. And I know we're talking a little cryptically, which we have to do, looking at Arctic sea ice thickness. Now, sea ice is ice that's on the sea. So if sea ice melts, it doesn't increase the sea level. It doesn't equate to a sea level rise. But it's interesting to see it because it was at a lower point before, and it seems to be gaining thickness as we see. We're basically kind of in the middle of this cycle that goes back to 2004. So the Arctic sea ice, pretty typical. Meanwhile, Greenland's building, and if it wasn't for all the volcanic activity in Antarctica, it probably would be building as well. And meanwhile, for those of you that are throwing stakes on the Barbie, you might have to go to the bank first and ask for a loan. Even in the face of surging grocery prices, retail beef and pork prices are causing sticker shock. And I mean, we never look at it ourselves because we are avoiding those items. And overall, I think what we've gotten from the guides is not just because of the vibrational impact on you, but there could be other things going on with the food supply as well, as far as causing safety concerns. And we have gotten that from them.
Yeah, we definitely want to just be careful what you consume these days. Just be really, really picky.
So yeah, we have inflation going on, and when you think about the plague upon the land, wow, boy, did it just change the economic layout completely. You have to look at the impact, how it's totally restructured things. But as we had said, the billionaires, they're doing better than ever. And maybe they're having their filet mignon on the Barbie.
Yep.
And I'm sure they're not worried about a little bit of inflation there. And not when you have the type of record windfall that they've had the past year and a half now. So we see here the president of the Center for the Study of Partisanship and Ideology said Thursday that the U.S. must realize it cannot indefinitely maintain its global leadership role in the face of China's growing power and influence. In other words, you've been basically number one, get ready to be number two, or 1A, or 1B. However they want to word it. But we do know, again, there are puppet masters at the top that are controlling everything. And many people were aware of this whole shift so long ago. China warns Australia's military is weak and will be first hit in any war with the Western alliance. Following now completed joint war games held by the US, Japan, France, and Australia in the East China Sea off the southwest coast of Japan earlier in the month, China has lashed out, particularly at its largest regional neighbor, Australia, calling its military weak and insignificant at a moment The two are locked in severe trade and diplomatic tit-for-tat dispute. Beijing voiced specific threats and warnings via its state-run English language mouthpiece, Global Times, which recently wrote, I love that word, doesn't that phrase, mouthpiece. There's a lot of that we see, and there's a lot of statements made that we know are completely untrue, but they're made with a purpose, a total purpose. So they said that Australia's military is too weak to be a worthy opponent of China. And if it dares to interfere in a military conflict with, for example, Taiwan, for instance, its forces will be among the first to be hit. Well, we talked about Australia. Australia is a continent, and it's very large. When you look at Australia, fairly comparable in size to China and the U.S. themselves, and yet just a fraction of the people. If you are talking phraseology from World War II, Lebensraum, living space, that's what Germany used as an excuse. We need more living space for our people. And that's why they blitzkrieged into Poland back in 1939. And the Polish forces were so outdated, they fought back on cavalry. Oh, what? Against tanks. It didn't last long. And when you look at the size of China, again, landmass area, China, US, Australia, fairly close. China and the US almost the same exact size. But the population, when you got 1.4 billion people to 337 million Americans, and just a tiny little fraction of Australians, it would be overrun so fast, and it would be flooded with migrants coming in, people being sent in from China, that I think the indigenous people are already just a tiny portion of the population. We got to see how this runs in cycles, and many might even say, hey, it's kind of karmic, because the Australian Aborigines, again, the indigenous people all over. In the Americas, we've talked about that too. The Holocaust that occurred there was far greater than the Holocaust that occurred in World War II. And of course, they were all picked up and pushed into quote unquote Indian territory in Oklahoma mostly, and in other areas too, kicked off their lands. And, Andrew Jackson did a lot of that, and he later on became president for his efforts. So, here we have Australia, and we might find that the people that are living in Australia right now end up being outnumbered by people coming in from China at some point in the future. I could really see that happening.
Yeah, it really could. I mean, they're looking at things like this and ominous signs all around often.
Yeah, and where is it going to end? Where is it going to end? I think there's this, in some ways, a little bit of a short-sightedness. Maybe we see everything a little bit too much from perhaps a biblical perspective, or, we think, okay, some might think that we are midway through the tribulation period, and at the end of the tribulation period, Yeshua Jesus is going to come back and, set everything right and everything's fine. But when we look at what's going on, I mean, what we've gotten in our meditation and from the guides, for perhaps some places, like for the U.S., I do feel that the toughest period is the period between now and we're going to peak around 2025-ish. It's what it feels like. But that doesn't mean it's over by a long stretch, as we have envisioned and seen the earth changes going on much farther. And as we shared, Edgar Casey saw, and his times has been off. His times of, he thought that so much was going to be happening way back in the 70s and 80s as far as the earth changes. But it's tricky when you're trying to predict time, as Cindy has gotten from the guides and shared with you guys time and time again. When in reality, time is a construct of our minds in this particular density. So, we have a long way to go. So Edgar Casey said he was going to reincarnate in Nebraska where the Pacific Ocean was going to end up running to in around 2100.
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe that was really more like 2150 or something along those lines. The Earth will still be here. There is already, as we've said, there is already a 5D version of the Earth in another reality. And so when we talk about reality itself, the more we've learned and the more we've gotten, the more, well, difficult it is to conceive of in some ways. As, again, we are multidimensional beings. And this consciousness that's in your body right now, the you that's in your body right now, is only a fraction of the bigger you. And I know for some that's so hard and perplexing to understand. And it's a concept that needs to be meditated on.
Well, it does, and it makes it more difficult for people to comprehend when you're in some kind of a survival mode, when life is so difficult, when you're trying to figure out which bills are you going to pay this month, and which bills do you have to pay this month so that your utilities don't get shut off. And that's the reality we live in. And that's what they're trying to keep us in. They're trying to keep us in that space of survival so we can't grow and expand in consciousness, because that's how we slip through their fingers.
So as you can see, and this is from the 24th, the Fleet Marine Tracker right now, basically, now that's the least I've seen as far as forces in the Pacific right now. And from what I hear, one of those carrier groups is going to be leaving too. So that's curious, because we haven't seen this low level over there in the Pacific right now. And here we go. UK carrier strike group joins NATO drill ahead of Indo-Pacific voyage. And this is talking about Defender 21 that we were just talking about. If we look at the Deagle numbers, which we can't really look at them anymore unless we find little clips, and I do have a screenshot. The countries that have the biggest loss of population, again, at first they were saying this is due to migration, due to economic issues, because we do expect there to be a great collapse economically. That was their first official statement. They changed that statement, and boy did they change that statement, and then everything got taken down because that statement felt awfully accurate, because it talked about the power structure on the planet collapsing and the desperation of those in power to keep power. And so that is what they came out saying. That's why we have these numbers where they are. Ooh, wow, that was quite a statement. Mm-hmm. By the way, nuclear flashcards, U.S. secrets exposed on learning apps. And back in 2016, I got Trojan horse, Trojan horse, Trojan horse. And I think that you guys, and most of us, can understand that right now. That whole Trojan horse, thinking that the barbarians are already inside the gates. The enemy is here, right here. They've been here, quote unquote, the enemy, quote unquote. When in reality, again, it is exactly that Tower of Babel, incident. Look, they're all united. We can't have this. We got to keep them at war. So what are we going to do? We divide up the nations. We put a heavenly being in charge of each nation. So each nation has its own heavenly being, quote unquote, in charge of it. And this way, that they're always kept at odds. They're always fighting each other. They're not questioning what's really going on. They're not questioning what's up. What was that up in the sky I saw? Don't question. Just be at odds with each other. So when we see stuff like this, U.S. troops charged with guarding nuclear secrets about their weaponry in Europe, they use popular education websites to create flashcards, exposing their exact locations and top secret security protocols. Yes, they created digital flashcard sets, and people found them later. People have been able to find them later, exposing all the nuclear secrets. Seriously. Trojan horse, guys. Trojan horse. It's pretty obvious to me anyway. Most Air Force manning remains flat, slight increase, but Space Force is getting a good sized spike. And again, now this is where there's always a little bit of a congruency. There are some things that get totally rewritten when we go from left to right. There's some things like we see them come down and undo what the last person did. But there's other things, specifically a couple of industries. One of them is the military. The other begins with a PH and sounds like an F. That constantly grow in affluence and the numbers, the riches, the resources. It just keeps increasing in these two industries, the power. And I find it curious that they call Space Force personnel guardians, as Space Force is going to be getting a big boost in personnel there. So interesting, too. I mean, wasn't that laughed at, I thought, by the left? And now here they are bumping it? And you actually have Microsoft's president warning 2024 is going to look like Orwell's 1984 if we don't stop the AI police state. What? We're being warned by the police state itself?
That sounds kind of strange.
Yes. Again, things have to be put out there. So this is Microsoft President Brad Smith. Wow. He just basically said, I'm constantly reminded of George Orwell's lessons from his book 1984. You know the fundamental story about a government who could see everything that everyone did and hear everything that everyone said all the time. Oh, he's talking about China. He's not talking about us. He's not talking about us. Is he? Interesting. Is it not just what's that shell game? It's a shell game, right? Where you put something over here and you try to distract people by getting them to think it's look over here. Meanwhile, where did it go? It's not even on the table anymore. So 9 U.S. Navy warships were swarmed by up to 100 UFOs over a 1 month period. See, here we have the disclosure coming out in droves. And again, that's going to lead a lot of people to just basically say it's Project Bluebeam, there are no aliens, there are only just demons, and go along with the Masonic ideology of King James, and all the way back to the Constantinian viewpoint of Scripture as well. Holy bleep, they're going fast. Radar shows the USS Omaha being swarmed by 14 UFOs. In same incident, spherical aircraft was filmed disappearing into the Pacific Ocean. It's back in July of 2019. What do you make out of this?
Well, I make out of it a little more drip disclosure, which is nice. And I was kind of viewing inside of those little aircraft. Those were little grays in there. I was hoping for a different type of entity. Those are little grays.
Yeah, so in reality, what we have is, people in the know knowing, hey, well, this is, these are quote unquote extraterrestrials, and in some cases interdimensionals. That is real, and perhaps most of the sailors probably had no clue. I would think so. At the top, this might be like what we just saw over with the war games going on over in the Pacific. This is just basically a war game simulation, so to speak, with allies. Namely, what you might call flying saucers manned with gray ETs that are under control of basically reptilian beings, Anunnaki, Ijiji, Draco, and doing an exercise that's going to lead to, disclosure, but a disclosure with a twist. Yeah, they're there. Yeah, we've been working with them all along. By the way, they're going to say, bad aliens are coming, but it's actually the good ones. They're going to portray some as the Galactic Federation that are not, and some that are, they're going to be portrayed as benevolent Pleiadians, but they're actually the Nords that we're working with the NAZIs. So this is all part of what's been planned. It is part of disclosure. People are going to realize, wow, our reality is more like Star Wars than we realized.
Mm-hmm. It is. Those are things that are going to come to more of a complete reality sooner than we think.
It is, but it's with a twist. And yes, people have put out there specific names and specific groupings, wanting us to comment on them. I think we'll just leave it out there that, as we've said before, there are infiltrators into a lot of different communities, including communities like this one, that is trying to get across the, picture of reality as it really is. And the fact that, we're not alone. There are ETs there, they're here. They've been here the whole time. And again, ask yourself, who's in charge of the world? If we're looking at it from a biblical perspective, well, it's Satan, the adversary. So if you're, accepting any of the mainstream type of view on our reality, or even from a religious or a political perspective, you're believing the adversary and what they're telling you. Now, they're infiltrating in many different ways. There are also people that are infiltrating even in this community of people talking about the earth changes and talking even about things about, how we're not heading for, global warming and meltdown, and it's actually more of the opposite thing that we have to be concerned with. Ultimately, it's going to be cooling. Well, it's going to be changed, because when when the poles do shift, which still may be quite a ways out, again, we're getting more mid 2040s for the big event. Everything's going to be just jumbled, north maybe south, south maybe north. We might have a huge shift in the axis. Actually, we've gotten that the Earth will no longer have that 23.5-degree tilt that it has right now, which, gosh, would that mean that Vedic and Vedic and Western astrology would be in line, perhaps? Maybe that would be interesting.
Well, the one thing though is the stars are static. Those stars don't change. The sky doesn't change. The Earth changes. So.
The Earth changes relative. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's fascinating to think about too. But there's so much to consider, guys. But yes, there are powers that be that are infiltrating, and they're infiltrating into, and they have infiltrated into the disclosure community too. And I do expect that, again, a good technique that they use is give you 90% truth, 10% lies. And that way, as things come out, and you can say, they said this, they said that, they yeah. And then when they say, oh, hey, this is the good guys, so many people that are truthers will believe it is the good guys. And it won't be. But that's where you have to develop your own intuition. That's where you have to engage your own kundalini and develop, that third eyesight, so you could see right through everything. That's the key. Discernment. True discernment does not come from the left brain.
Right.
Navy fighters shoot down hostile UFO after it refuses to give its pronouns. Yeah, and like Cindy said, this is complete BS. I said, I know, but I just want to share this because maybe they'll be doing something like this in the future, not necessarily because it didn't say its perfect pronouns.
Well, you said it could be like what is that when they put information out beforehand? Predictive.
Yeah, it's predictive programming in a way. U.S. military leaders confirmed they shot down an unidentified flying object over the Pacific Ocean after the mysterious craft refused to identify itself with its preferred pronouns. Yes, we can confirm that one of our F-18 fighters intercepted an apparently quite transphobic alien spacecraft yesterday, said Navy Admiral Arnie Ahab. After several unsuccessful attempts to hail the object for identifying pronouns such as he, him, or they, them, we were forced to blow it out of the sky. Thank you, Space Force. California residents were startled by what appeared to be a massive explosion off the coast, followed by a burning object plunging into the sea. We're happy to say we protected the Earth from alien visitor that was obviously not advanced enough to engage in common trans-sensitive pronoun courtesy during a greeting, said Navy Secretary Thomas W. Harker in a statement. You're all safe now. President B thanked the Navy for their great work and deployed more aircraft carriers to the Pacific in case any more transphobic extraterrestrials showed up. Think about it. I mean, that reminds me of Orson Welles and War of the Worlds. Will there be a modern version of the War of the Worlds going on? Interesting, isn't it? Milky Way, by the way, not unusual. Surprising astronomers. The first detailed cross-section of a galaxy broadly similar to the Milky Way published today reveals that our galaxy evolved gradually, instead of being the result of a violent smash-up. The finding throws the origin story of our home in doubt. It also throws in doubt the fact that, hey, life on Earth is completely unique. There's nothing like it anywhere. And, that's not the case. If we look to the ancient Vedas and we see they actually knew the span of the Milky Way itself. They knew the shape of the Milky Way. They knew how long it would take to cross. They knew of hundreds of thousands of humanoid species somehow. How did they know all these things? Well, we get the statement from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita talking to Arjuna, who is about to fight a big battle. And he said, you know what the difference is between you and I? I remember my past incarnations. You don't. And humanity has been in the dark about its reality. And the benevolent beings that have not been with us openly since 3102 BC, the beginning of the Kali Yuga, if we go by the Vedic sources, they were here actually teaching us how the universe works. That's why we see this hidden occult knowledge in the Western mystery traditions carrying on covertly because, well, look at what happened to the indigenous people of the Americas. Look at what happened to the quote-unquote witches, natural healers, the psychics, the intuitives. Can't have any of that. You can't be talking to spirits. You can't know how to heal yourself naturally with herbs. You can't realize from a shamanic perspective the reality of different layers, different densities of being, the fact that you're walking through people all day long, people that are just on different densities, vibrating at a different frequency. All this had to be hidden in order to hide the fact that the planet itself is not run by Homo sapiens. Gamma rays 10 times more energetic than thought possible detected. There you go. And gamma rays are responsible for a lot of things. Look at the Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, look at him.
Right? But again, that's a reference in some ways to what humanity can become when we look at the legends of the gods. When we talk about the fallen angels, I was going to do a video on that as well. We're talking about the latent potential that's inside humans ourselves. As again, source lies within. When Yeshua said, I and my Father are one, they picked up stones to stone him. Why? Because you can't have people knowing that they have source within them. They don't need any sort of power structure. They don't need to even go to a church. It's wonderful to get together and to have fellowship. That's beautiful. But we don't need any pope, any sort of hierarchy over us because it's all within. He also said, the kingdom of heaven lies within you. So when you hear people saying, look, he's there, he's in the clouds, he's coming. No, the second coming is all about a revelation in consciousness that is one going from the fourth chakra, well, going from the solar plexus chakra, I should say, to the heart chakra. So going from the third to the fourth. And that is the beginning of unity consciousness, because when we're starting to operate out of our heart chakra, then we're more concerned with service to others than we are with our own ego and pulling things up and realizing the oneness of everything. And that's the big shift. Because again, how could we do greater things than him if he's the only one that has source in him?
That's right. We got to take these things into consideration so we can grow spiritually, because that's the most important thing that needs to be prioritized.
Again, that's like saying, what's the sound of one hand clapping?
Mm-hmm.
So, guys, thanks for being part of the family. Thanks for your support on Ko-Fi and Patreon. If you need to make an appointment, it's evolutionaryenergyarts@gmail.com or EEARTS@protonmail.com. Check out the website, evolutionaryenergyarts.com. As always, God bless and namaste.
Namaste.